My name is Renee Whitaker. I'm 45. And at the time, I truly believed I had a stable life. Nothing flashy, nothing viral, just steady. The kind of marriage you assume will keep existing because it always has. My husband, Graham, was 44. We'd been married for 4 years, together for 6. Standard suburban setup, 3-bedroom house, a mortgage that stung every time I thought about interest rates, 2 cars that mostly worked, and a routine that made us look like a couple people would describe as solid. We attended Cornerstone Community every Sunday at 11 Hall. It had been Graham's idea originally. He said he wanted to get grounded again, find community, build something wholesome. I'd grown up in church, so I didn't fight it. It sounded like a good way to anchor ourselves in something real. That particular Sunday started like 100 others. We got up, got dressed, drove to the service, sat through worship and a sermon. Patience, kindness, something like that. I can't even remember the topic now because what happened afterwards scraped the whole day clean. Service ended around noon. I headed toward our car while Graham stayed near the entrance, talking to a couple men he'd started recognizing from a small group. Normal routine. I was already thinking about lunch. And then I heard screaming. Not an argument, not a raised voice. Screaming. Raw, cracking, the kind that turns heads before your brain even translates the words. I spun around and saw a man in his late 30s storming across the lot like he'd been shot out of a cannon. Dress shirt, tie loosened, face red, eyes wild. He looked like he'd come straight out of service and into a breakdown. And he was headed directly for my husband. He reached Graham and grabbed at him, at his collar, his shoulder, like he was trying to haul him backwards. I moved before I fully understood what I was seeing. "Hey!" I yelled, jogging over. "Get off him! What's your problem?" I shoved myself between them, pushing the guy back. He stumbled, caught himself on the hood of a nearby car, and then pointed at Graham like he was identifying a criminal. "You!" he shouted. "You ruined my marriage! You destroyed my family!" Graham's expression didn't look scared. It didn't even look confused. It looked annoyed, like someone had cut him off in traffic. I blinked, trying to catch up. "Sir, what are you talking about?" The man's jaw was tight, trembling with rage. "Don't play dumb. I know exactly who you are, Victor. I know what you've been doing." "Victor?" My head snapped to Graham. His name was Graham. Everyone at this church knew him as Graham. We had introduced ourselves as Renee and Graham Whitaker. We had filled out forms. We had sat in circles and made small talk and prayed with people. Nobody called him Victor. "You've got the wrong person," I said quickly. "His name is Graham. There's no Victor here." The man's face twisted like my words were gasoline. "Oh, so now we're lying? Now we're pretending? You've been sleeping with my wife for months, and you're going to stand here in God's parking lot and act like you don't know what I'm talking about?" My stomach went cold. I opened my mouth, but Graham spoke first, calm, clipped. "I don't know you," he said. "Back off." The man stepped forward again, pointing so close to Graham's face it felt like it should have been illegal. "You don't know me? My kids cry themselves to sleep because their mother's blowing up our life for you, for this. Whatever you are." People were staring now. Half the congregation still out there, lingering in clusters, pretending not to watch while watching anyway. Nothing says Sunday worship like public humiliation in the parking lot. "This is ridiculous," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've got the wrong man, and you need to stop before someone calls the police." He ignored me completely, eyes locked on Graham. "Tell her. Tell her who you really are. Tell her you've been meeting Zara at hotels. Tell her about the apartment. Tell her about the dinners like you're some kind of couple." That name hit me harder than it should have. Zara. I didn't know a Zara. Not personally, not in our social circle, but something about the name felt familiar, like a word I'd seen on a screen in passing and dismissed. Graham adjusted his collar, more irritated than shaken. "You're insane." The man laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was bitter. "Insane? You wreck my home and I'm insane? I have receipts. I have proof. You think I haven't been watching?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice like it would somehow reduce the chaos. "Sir, listen. If your wife is cheating, I'm sorry, truly, but you are accusing the wrong person." He turned his glare on me, and for the first time I saw how wrecked he actually was, how sleepless, how desperate. "You don't know him," he said, voice shaking. "You think you do. That's the worst part. You think you're married to a man, but you're married to a liar." Graham's eyes flicked, just once, quickly, like a reflex he didn't mean to show. And that tiny flick did something to me. It was so small I could have missed it, but it didn't look like confusion. It looked like recognition. The man took a step back, breathing hard, scanning the crowd like he realized he had witnesses now. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Then he leaned in toward Graham again, voice low but sharp enough that I still heard it. "When you finally figure out who he is," he said, "don't say nobody warned you." He walked away fast, shoulders rigid, like if he didn't leave right then, he'd do something he couldn't undo. He got into his car and peeled out of the lot, tires chirping, disappearing past the church sign like a scene out of a bad movie. For a beat, everything froze. Then the sound came back. People talking again, cars starting, the normal world attempting to reattach itself. A pastor approached, concern written all over his face. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah," I said automatically. "Just some confused person. Wrong name, wrong situation." The pastor nodded slowly, not fully convinced, but polite enough not to dig. "If you need to talk—" "We're fine," Graham cut in. His tone was too fast, too firm, like he wanted the subject buried before it breathed. We got into our car and drove home in silence. Graham spent the ride on his phone, thumbs moving like his life depended on it. I watched the road, but my mind kept rewinding the scene. Victor, Zara. And the way Graham hadn't looked scared. He'd looked inconvenienced, like the man yelling hadn't dropped a bomb. Like he'd just made a mess Graham didn't feel like cleaning up in public. When we got home, Graham acted normal. Made lunch, put on TV, moved through the house like nothing had happened, like his morning hadn't included being accused of wrecking a family in front of our church. He didn't mention it once, neither did I, because part of me wanted to believe it was nothing. But a smaller part, quieter, colder, kept whispering the same thought on repeat. If it was truly nothing, why did his calm feel rehearsed? And why did the wrong name sound like it belonged to him anyway? The next 2 days passed the way most denial does. Quietly, efficiently, like your brain is sweeping something sharp under the rug so you don't have to step on it yet. Monday was normal. Graham went to work. I went to work. We texted about groceries. We ate dinner. We watched a show. We weren't even really watching. He laughed in the right places. I laughed back. It almost worked. Almost. But every time he picked up his phone, my eyes tracked it like it was a weapon. Every time his screen lit up, a small alarm went off in my chest. And that name, Victor, kept floating up at the worst moments, like a piece of lint you can't stop feeling on your tongue. By Tuesday afternoon, I was exhausted. Not from anything I'd done, but from everything I hadn't said. Work let out early. Not a huge dramatic reason, just a rare win. We wrapped a project ahead of schedule, and my manager waved us out like she was giving us a gift. I sat in my car for a minute in the parking lot, thinking about going home to an empty house and the kind of silence you can only hear when you're alone. Graham had texted that morning. Running errands after work, might grab coffee with the guys. Normal. Ordinary. Married life boring. I drove home around 4:00 p.m. The driveway was empty, no car, no movement behind the blinds. The house looked peaceful, like it was waiting for me to believe in it again. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and the quiet wrapped around me. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my purse on the entry table, and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath since Sunday. I didn't even think of fare. Not yet. I thought, thank God, I can finally watch something without him complaining. I poured myself a drink, something cold, something automatic, then sank onto the couch and grabbed the remote. The smart TV lit up. Home screen, apps, streaming tiles, and right in the center, like a cruel little preview, was a row labeled recently synced photos. I stared at it without meaning to. The first few thumbnails were normal. Church group selfies, a picture of our backyard, a random screenshot of a recipe Graham said he wanted to try but never did. And then, a photo of Graham, not standing next to me, not posing for a family picture. Graham was sitting at a restaurant table, leaning toward a woman I didn't recognize. Her hand was on his waist, under the table, like it belonged there. His smile was intimate, easy. The smile he used to give me when we were still new. My throat went dry. I sat up so fast the ice in my cup clinked. Okay, I whispered, like saying it out loud would turn it into a misunderstanding. Okay, maybe it was a friend's wife. Maybe it was a coworker. Maybe it was a cousin. Maybe I'd lost my mind. My thumb pressed the photo app without thinking. The TV loaded the gallery, and an album popped up first, almost proudly, like it had been waiting to be found. V plus Z. I didn't blink for a full 5 seconds. V and Z. Not G and R. Not anything that belonged to our life. My finger hovered over the remote like it weighed 50 pounds. I could still turn it off. I could still stand up, walk away, pretend I never saw it. But something in me was already moving, already stepping forward into whatever was waiting behind that door. I clicked. The album opened. 3-7 photos. I felt my stomach drop so hard it was like my body forgot how gravity worked. The first image was Graham and the woman. Closer, clearer, no room for maybe. Her hair was dark and glossy. She was wearing a dress that looked expensive, the kind of outfit you put on when you want someone to look at you and think you're worth losing everything for. Graham's hand was on her thigh. Not hidden. Not accidental. Possessive. I scrolled. Restaurant after restaurant. Selfies in hotel mirrors. A photo of her legs tangled with his on a couch that was definitely not ours. A picture of him shirtless, smiling at the camera like he was proud of whatever he was doing. A photo from a weekend he'd told me he was out of town for work. I recognized the skyline in the background because I'd visited that city once and loved it. My chest tightened. And then timestamps. I clicked one image and saw the date. 2 years ago. My vision blurred. 2 years, I said out loud, like the word might change shape if I heard it. Not a mistake. Not a bad night. Not a we hit a rough patch. A second life. I kept scrolling, numb now, like my body was on autopilot and my soul was lagging behind. Then I saw them. Text screenshots. He'd screenshotted conversations like souvenirs. And right there, bright and undeniable across the screen, was the name I'd heard in the parking lot. Can't wait to see you tonight, Victor. Miss you already, V. Victor, you make me feel chosen. Victor. My hands started shaking so badly I had to set my drink down before it spilled. So that man on Sunday, he hadn't been confused. He hadn't gotten the wrong person. He'd been saying the name Graham used when he wasn't being my husband. I scrolled again. More messages. Zara, the woman's name, was everywhere now, woven through the album like a signature. Hotel confirmations, dinner receipts, jewelry store snapshots. And then, something that made the betrayal turn into something else entirely. A screenshot of a credit notification. Approved, limit 8,000. Another message beneath it. Just got approved for another one. Dinner at that place you wanted? Another one. Another what? My mind tried to stay rational, tried to build an explanation fast enough to cover the panic. Maybe he opened a card for himself. Maybe it was harmless. Maybe... I kept scrolling. A photo of a credit card. Same bank as ours, but a different design. And the name on the card. My name, Renee Whitaker. But the numbers didn't match any of my accounts. My breath left my body in one long, silent exhale. No, I whispered. I zoomed in. The name was correct. My name. Like someone had printed my identity onto a tool and handed it to him. My phone buzzed in my pocket, an email notification, something meaningless. But I didn't look. I couldn't. I stood up and walked to the kitchen like the movement could keep me from collapsing. I opened my laptop with fingers that barely worked. Credit monitoring account. The one I'd set up years ago and checked maybe twice a year because my life had never required paranoia. I logged in. The page loaded, and the world shifted. 3 credit cards I didn't recognize. Total balance, $42,000. All in my name. Opened within the last 18 months. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I clicked. Details. Issuers. Open dates. Addresses. My social security number tied to all of them. I swallowed hard like my throat was trying to reject the truth. Then I checked further down. 2 personal loans. Amounts $15,000 and $8,000. Approved within the last year. Payments being made from accounts I didn't control. I did the math twice because my brain refused to accept it. Credit cards. Loans. Over $65,000 in debt. Debt I didn't know existed. Debt that could ruin me. Debt that could follow me for a decade. Debt he had built while smiling at me across the dinner table, while sitting beside me in church, while letting me believe our life was intact. I sat back slowly, staring at the screen. It wasn't just cheating. It was theft. It was fraud. It was someone wearing my name like a coat. My eyes flicked back to the TV. The album. The messages. The names. Victor. Zara. And suddenly that man in the parking lot didn't feel like a random lunatic anymore. He felt like the warning label on a bottle I'd already swallowed. My hands moved before I fully decided to move. I started screenshotting everything. The texts. The photos. The credit card image with my name. The loan approval message. Hotel bookings. Restaurant receipts. Jewelry purchases. Evidence. I saved it to my phone, to my laptop, to a cloud folder Graham didn't have access to. I didn't know I was building a case. I just knew I needed the truth to exist somewhere outside my body, because my body was starting to feel like it couldn't hold it. 2 hours passed like that, me scrolling, saving, organizing. The sun lowered outside the windows. The house stayed quiet. And then, at around 6:30, I heard it. The garage door. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My pulse spiked. Graham was home. I closed the laptop but kept the screenshots open on my phone, my thumb hovering like I was holding a detonator. The front door opened. He walked in carrying shopping bags, smiling like a man who'd had a normal Tuesday. "Hey," he said easily, "you're home early." His voice was warm, familiar, believable. He set the bags on the counter and started unpacking. New clothes, a small bag from a boutique I'd never heard of, something shiny in a box that looked like jewelry. My eyes locked on the box. He followed my gaze, then chuckled like it was nothing. "Found some great deals today," he said. "You wouldn't believe the sales." I sat on the couch, perfectly still, watching him perform. I didn't say a word. He glanced at me, smile fading slightly. "You okay? You're quiet." I lifted my eyes to his. "Just thinking," I said. "About what?" "About Victor. About Zara. About my name printed on a credit card in someone else's wallet." But I didn't give him that. "Not yet." I forced my voice to stay calm. "About how I need to run some errands tomorrow," I said. "Handle some business." He shrugged, relieved by the boredom of my answer. "Okay, want me to make dinner?" I stared at him, wondering how many times he'd stood in this exact kitchen after being Victor all day, and then walked through that door as Graham like he could switch lives with a key. "Sure," I said softly. He moved around the kitchen like everything was normal, and I sat there, silent, letting him believe the lie still had time. Because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg for an explanation. I was going to do what he'd been doing for 2 years. Plan quietly, act normal, and then change everything when he wasn't looking. That night, I slept less than an hour. Not because I was pacing or crying or staring at the ceiling. I slept less than an hour because my brain wouldn't stop working. It was like some switch had flipped, like the part of me that used to believe in talking things through had stepped aside and something colder, sharper, and much more focused had taken control. I lay there next to Graham, listening to his breathing even out, watching his chest rise and fall like he didn't have a care in the world. Like he hadn't been Victor a few hours earlier. Like he hadn't built an entire second life using my name as a weapon. By morning, my exhaustion had hardened into clarity. I made coffee, stronger than usual. Didn't ask him if he wanted any. He kissed my cheek on his way out the door, brief and automatic. "I've got a long day," he said. "Probably won't be home until late." "Of course you won't," I thought. Out loud, I just nodded. "Okay." The door closed behind him, and the house went quiet again. That quiet didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt useful. I opened my laptop and pulled up everything I'd saved the day before. I went through it slowly this time, methodically, like I was cataloging evidence instead of reacting to shock. Photo timestamps, text threads, credit card approvals, loan documents. Every piece fit together too cleanly to deny. This wasn't impulse. This wasn't one bad choice snowballing. This was planning. He had chosen a name, Victor, and used it consistently. He had chosen a woman, Zara, and maintained the relationship like it mattered. He had chosen my identity to fund it all, confident I wouldn't notice until it was too late. And the most humiliating part? I almost hadn't. My credit score had dipped over the last year, about 100 points, but I'd blamed the mortgage, the car payments, normal life. He'd counted on that. I opened my credit report again, this time pulling the full details. Each fraudulent account showed a different open date, staggered just enough not to look suspicious all at once. He hadn't gone on a spending spree. He'd paced himself. I felt something twist in my chest, not heartbreak. Anger, the kind that settles in your bones. I started a folder on my desktop and labeled it something bland. Documents. Inside it, I organized everything by category. Affair evidence, fraud and identity theft, financial records, timeline. It took me almost 3 hours to finish. By the time I leaned back in my chair, my hands weren't shaking anymore. I didn't feel panicked. I felt prepared. And that scared me a little, because it meant I was already past the point of wanting explanations. I wanted outcomes. I pulled up my phone and searched for divorce attorneys in our city, ones who specialized in high-conflict cases, fraud, financial abuse. I read reviews like I was hiring someone to perform surgery, because that's what this was going to be. I sent an email to one firm that stood out, attaching a brief explanation and a handful of screenshots. I expected to hear back in a day or two. They responded in 40 minutes. Emergency consultation available tomorrow at 8 o'clock a.m. I stared at the screen, then nodded to myself. Good. Next step. Identity theft reporting. I pulled up the checklist. Police report, documentation, credit freeze, account separation. I wrote everything down on a legal pad. Not because I needed to remember, because writing it made it real. I felt like one of those quiet characters in old movies, the ones who absorb everything until the moment they stop absorbing and start moving. By noon, my plan was mapped out. 8:00 a.m., an attorney. 10:00 a.m., police report. 12:00 p.m., bank. 2:00 p.m., locksmith. Graham would be at work all day. He always was on Wednesdays. The timing felt almost cruel in its efficiency. When he got home that night, I was calm. Too calm. I made dinner. We sat at the table. He talked about work, about some coworker drama I didn't care about. I watched him chew, swallow, sip his drink. I wondered how many meals he'd eaten with Zara while telling me he was working late. I wondered if he ever felt guilty, or if guilt had been replaced by convenience a long time ago. After dinner, I stood and collected the plates. I've got some work emails to catch up on, I said lightly. Going to be in the office for a bit. He barely looked up. Okay. I closed the door to my home office and stayed there for 3 hours. Not working. Preparing. I researched what would happen once I filed. What exclusive possession of the marital home meant. What judges looked for in fraud cases. How quickly emergency motions could move. Every answer tightened the knot in my chest and strengthened my resolve. Around midnight, I sent a follow-up email to the attorney with the full evidence folder attached. Then I backed it up. Twice. To places Graham couldn't access. At 1:30 a.m., I turned off the light and lay back in bed beside him. He rolled over in his sleep, draped an arm across my waist like he always did. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, and let him touch me for what I knew would be the last time. By 2 a.m., the plan was complete. Not vague, not emotional, concrete. This wasn't about catching him. I already had. This was about removing him. Morning came faster than it should have. I dressed professionally, not out of habit, but intention. When Graham asked where I was headed, I didn't lie. I've got errands, I said. He smiled. Busy day? You have no idea. At 7:55, I sat in a leather chair across from a man who specialized in divorce and financial fraud. I laid everything out on his desk. The photos, the texts, the credit cards, the forged signatures, the fake name. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look shocked. He looked impressed. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled slowly. This isn't just divorce, he said. This is felony fraud. Multiple counts. I nodded. That's what I thought. The fake identity makes it worse, he continued. It shows premeditation, planning. This wasn't a mistake. What do? I asked. He didn't hesitate. We filed today. Divorce petition. Emergency motion for exclusive possession of the home. Protective orders. You report the identity theft to police immediately. Freeze everything. Give him no room to do more damage. Can I make him leave? I asked. Yes, he said. With this evidence? Absolutely. Relief hit me. Not soft, not emotional. Sharp. Good. By the time I left his office, the paperwork was already being drafted. I went straight to the police station, filed the report, handed over copies, watched an officer read through the documents with a tightening jaw. This is serious, he said. I know, I replied. Then the bank. Accounts separated. Credit frozen. Joint cards closed. I left his half untouched, not out of kindness, but clarity. I wasn't stealing. I was protecting. At 2 o'clock, the locksmith showed up. Changed every lock. New keys. One set. Mine. By the time I sat down on the couch at 4 p.m., everything was done. The house felt different. Still. Owned. At 5:30, Graham pulled into the driveway. I heard the click of his key in the lock. Then again. Then harder. Then the knock. Renee, he called. Why isn't my key working? I stood, picked up the folder of papers from the coffee table, and walked to the door. I opened it and didn't step aside. Because I changed the locks, I said. His confusion flickered into irritation. You can't do that. I live here. Not anymore. I stepped back just enough for him to see the papers. The divorce petition. The police report. The screenshots pulled up on my laptop behind them. His face drained of color. What is this? He asked. This, I said calmly, is the end of Victor. His mouth opened. Closed. I looked him straight in the eye. I know about Zara. I know about the credit cards. I know about the loans. I know about the fake name. I know about all of it. He scoffed, recovering fast. You're overreacting. I smiled, small, cold. No, I said, I'm responding. And for the first time since Sunday, he looked scared. For a second, Graham just stood there in the doorway, staring at the papers like they might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic if he waited long enough. Then his face hardened. Renee, he said, lowering his voice like volume had ever been the problem, you're being dramatic. I didn't move. Behind me, the living room looked exactly the same as it always had. The couch, the framed photos, the throw blanket he'd picked out because it made the place feel warm. None of it belonged to him anymore. I'm being precise, I said. There's a difference. He stepped inside without being invited, his eyes scanning the room like he was already calculating losses. You can't just lock me out. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works, I replied, especially when you commit identity theft and fraud against your spouse. He laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Fraud? Are you serious right now? I reached back and tapped my laptop screen, still open on the coffee table. The album thumbnails glowed like evidence under interrogation lights. Victor, I said. Zara. 2 years. 3 credit cards. 2 personal loans. $65,000 in debt in my name. Forged signatures. Fake identity. Each word landed like a measured strike. He rolled his eyes. We're married. What's yours is mine. That's how marriage works. No, I said. Marriage doesn't mean you get to wear my identity like a costume while you cheat on me. He crossed his arms. You were always working, always tired. You checked out long before I did. I stared at him, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the man in front of me. Not because he was hiding, but because he'd finally stopped pretending. You didn't cheat because I worked, I said. You cheated because you wanted to. His jaw tightened. So what? You're just going to destroy my life now? I let out a slow breath. You destroyed your life. I'm just documenting it. I walked past him and headed upstairs. What are you doing? He called after me. Packing your things. You don't get to do that. But I was already in the bedroom, pulling open drawers, grabbing hangers, moving with calm efficiency. Shirts, pants, shoes, stacked, sorted, carried out like inventory. He followed me up the stairs, panic starting to crack through his anger. Stop touching my stuff, he snapped. We need to talk about this like adults. We're past talking, I said, tossing an armful of clothes onto the landing. He grabbed one of the shirts from my hands. You can't just throw me out. I released the fabric. He stumbled back half a step. This is my house, I said evenly. My name is on the mortgage. My income pays for it. And you committed crimes against me. He scoffed. Zara already knows you found out. We're going to be together anyway. Her divorce is almost final. I froze for half a second. Not from pain, from clarity. So that's it, I said. You planned this. You just didn't plan on getting caught. He shrugged. It was going to happen eventually. I walked past him, carrying another load downstairs. Behind me, he kept talking, deflecting, minimizing, rewriting history in real time. You're boring, he said at one point, desperation slipping through. Predictable. Nobody wants that. I dropped his laptop, work bag, and shoes by the front door. What I am, I said, is done. I opened the door and started placing his things outside, bag by bag, box by box. He followed me, voice rising. You're going to regret this. I didn't answer. I kept going until his entire life was sitting on the driveway like garbage day had come early. He stood there, arms crossed, face flushed. You'll die alone in this house. I looked at him once, really looked. Get off my property. He loaded his car in furious silence, slammed the trunk, and rolled down the window. Enjoy your miserable life, Renee. I smiled faintly. Enjoy your fraud charges, Victor. He peeled out of the driveway, tires squealing, gone. I locked the door, set the deadbolt, and stood there breathing hard, not from fear, but from adrenaline. For the first time in years, the house was quiet in a way that felt honest. 3 weeks later, we were in court. He showed up with his lawyer and his mother, dressed in conservative colors, hair perfect, face carefully neutral. The performance was immaculate. His mother sat behind him, arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd personally ruined civilization. My lawyer leaned in and murmured, She's going to paint you as controlling. Stay calm. Graham's lawyer went first. He described me as vindictive, emotional, a wife who overreacted to a brief lapse in judgment, a woman who locked her husband out and filed false police reports out of spite. Then his mother took the stand. He was always afraid of her, she said, eyes already watering. She monitored everything, his spending, his friends, his movements. I almost laughed. I hadn't even known he had a second name. She couldn't handle that he made a mistake, his mother continued. She's trying to punish him, ruin him. My lawyer stood. Your Honor, he said calmly. May I present evidence? He handed the judge a folder. Inside it was everything. The photos, the texts, the forged documents, the credit reports, the police report, the timeline. I watched the judge's expression change as she read, neutral to skeptical to visibly irritated. My lawyer spoke again. This was not a brief lapse in judgment. This was a 2-year affair conducted under a false identity, funded by systematic identity theft. Graham's lawyer tried to object. The judge raised a hand. I'm reading. She looked up at Graham's mother. Did you know your son used the name Victor during this affair? Silence. Did you know he opened credit cards and loans in his wife's name? His mother looked at the floor. No. So you testified under oath without knowing the facts, the judge said flatly. She turned to Graham. Do you deny these documents? He wiped his face. I made mistakes. You made plans, the judge corrected, for 2 years. She leaned back. No spousal support, no claim to the home. The respondent is responsible for all fraudulent debt. Graham stood abruptly. That's not fair. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. I walked out with everything I'd built. He walked out with consequences. And for the first time since my life split in two, I didn't feel broken. I felt finished. Justice doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, on paper, in deadlines, in court orders that don't care how sorry you suddenly feel. 6 months passed. The divorce finalized faster than most, accelerated by fraud charges and the paper trail Graham had left behind like breadcrumbs he never thought I'd follow. The house was secure. My credit was crawling back, inch by inch. I learned the strange language of restitution schedules and credit freezes. I learned how much peace costs and how worth it is. Graham pled guilty to reduced fraud charges. 3 years probation, full restitution, community service, no jail time, but a permanent record that would follow him longer than I ever did. Victor didn't survive the plea deal. Neither did the fantasy. Zara took him in after her own divorce exploded. The man from the parking lot, the one I'd dismissed as unstable, had been right about everything. His wife had taken the house, primary custody, child support, alimony that would keep Graham's new life permanently underwater. The affair that had felt glamorous in hotel mirrors turned into 2 broke adults in a cramped apartment, resentful and trapped. I heard all of this secondhand. I didn't ask. I didn't check his social media. I didn't need updates to feel validated. I was busy rebuilding. I kept things light. No promises, no "what are we" conversations. About a month after the dust settled, I met Ethan at the gym. Early 40s. Calm, direct. No tragic backstory offered unprompted. We grabbed coffee once, then again. Then ended up back at my place one Sunday afternoon with takeout and a movie neither of us was paying attention to. It wasn't love. It was peaceful, and that felt revolutionary. We were on the couch when the doorbell rang. Not a knock. A press and hold like whoever was on the other side needed me to understand urgency. I frowned. Expecting anyone? Ethan shook his head. No. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it without thinking. Graham stood on my porch. He looked wrecked. Hair uncombed, clothes wrinkled, and a fresh, ugly black eye blooming across his cheekbone, purple and swollen, still tender. Renee, he said, voice shaky. Can we talk? My first thought wasn't fear. It was disbelief. What happened to your face? I asked. He touched it gingerly. Zara's ex. Things got heated. Child support issues. I almost laughed. Almost. There's nothing to talk about, I said. The divorce is final. He glanced past me, eyes landing on Ethan sitting on my couch, wearing one of my sweatshirts. Something in Graham cracked. Who's that? None of your business. His jaw tightened. You moved on fast. You did first, I replied. As Victor, remember? His voice dropped. I made mistakes. I know that now, but what we had was real. I miss you. I looked at him, really looked. At the man who'd stolen my name, my credit, my trust. You miss stability, I said, not me. He swallowed. I need help. I can't afford my own place. Zara's talking about breaking up. I have nowhere to go. I stepped back, blocking the doorway fully now. Call your mother. Call a lawyer. Don't call me. Ethan stood behind me, arms crossed, assessing the situation without panic. This your ex? He asked. Yeah. Graham's desperation twisted into anger. You're choosing some random hookup over me? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Random hookup is rich coming from someone with a criminal record and a black eye. Graham's face darkened, and then he lunged. Part 6. The porch and the final line. It happened fast. Too fast for regret. Graham reached for Ethan like he was still entitled to something in my life. Ethan sidestepped. One clean punch. Graham went down hard on my porch, clutching his face, now sporting a matching bruise. I stepped between them instantly. That's enough. Graham looked up at me, eyes wild, both cheeks swelling. You let him hit me. You attacked him, I said flatly, on my property, which is on camera. That sobered him instantly. He stayed there for a moment, crying, humiliated, bleeding just enough to be dramatic. Then he staggered to his feet and walked to his car like a man who had finally run out of bad decisions to make. Ethan exhaled. Your ex is unhinged. Yeah, I said, that tracks. The next morning, I went to the courthouse, filed for a restraining order, provided the footage, the records, the history. It was granted the same day. No contact, 500 feet, 0 exceptions. Graham violated it once. He'd go to jail, probation or not. That was the last time I saw him. I cleaned the porch. Ethan washed his hands. Life resumed. Not dramatically. Not with speeches or closure conversations. Just forward. Graham didn't lose everything because I was cruel. He lost everything because he was careless, greedy, and convinced he'd never be held accountable. That's what happens when you play stupid games. You win stupid prizes. And I finally won something better. Peace.